bad bandwidth there.
Angela, we're a few minutes after 10 and it looks like we got a pretty decent crowd. So if you want, we can start moving along.
Yes, let's go.
All right. So we'll start with some housekeeping type stuff before formally convening the meeting. But, just thank you for joining us today. The meeting is being live streamed so that members of the public can observe the meeting and interact with the committee. As Jody mentioned, we already have a few people on the publicinput.com platform, and at the appropriate times, we'll open up the pathway. This meeting, we had originally intended to be in person for the first time in a very long time, but last week with the resurgence of COVID and the Delta variant, I did reach out to Scott Leathersich and Angela Ellis as the the chairperson and vice chairperson respectively, and also Kevin Rooney, who was intended to be the meeting host, and we all agreed that we should go back to having it online. So with that, as I said, public can participate and listen. We will be recording. An archive will be kept on the GTC website, available for people to view and at their leisure. And consistently, our agenda does include 2 separate opportunities for the public forum. The public is able to join us on our publicinput.com/GTC Planning Committee webpage. They can send in chat, text. They can join the queue to talk on phone when the time is appropriate. Next slide, please. Here is the information for folks to either leave a recorded comment or to join the speaker queue by dialing in to the meeting. And with that, Angela, we're ready to call to order.
Okay, well, let's call the meeting to order and start with introductions. Alex, did you want to go through the roster for roll call?
Sure, Angela. Genesee County, Tim Hens. Livingston County, Angela, you're here. I see Jason as well. Monroe County Legislature, George Hebert. Ontario County, Bill Wright.
Bill will be joining us shortly. Tim McElligott is here.
Thanks, Tim. Orleans County, John Papanetti.
I'm here.
Thanks, man. Seneca County, Mitch Rowe. Wayne County, Kevin Rooney.
I'm here.
Good. Yates County, Craig Pryor. Craig's on the line. Monroe County Executive, Jim Pond.
Good morning, I'm here.
Monroe County Planning Board, Rochelle Bell.
She was there a minute ago.
Yeah, she signed in here. Monroe County Supervisors Association, Bob Kiley. Monroe County at Large, Scott.
This is Tom Pollock. I'm here as his alternate.
Thank you. David Lindsay. No. City of Rochester Mayor, Norm Jones. Rochester City Planning Commission, Kevin Kelly. City of Rochester at Large, Eric Frisch.
Oh, yeah.
Eric's here. Empire State Development Corporation, Stephen Golding. New York State DEC. New York State DOT, Chris Reeve.
Joel Feinberg representing.
Thanks, Joel. New York State Thruway Authority. We have a couple of folks.
Good morning. Matthew Durawa and Tirma Nyama are representing the Thruway.
Great, thank you. Welcome. Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council, Jay.
Right here, Alex.
RGRTA, Bill Carpenter. We have Ken Boise on for later as well, but we don't see Eric or Julie on yet. And we don't have any of our federal partners on this morning, so that's a quorum.
Okay,
Members present.
okay, thank you, Alex. Let's go ahead and move into the public forum then. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the committee?
Let me just double check, Angela. I do not believe we have anybody that would wish us to address the committee. I'm just double checking. We do have several people that are joining us this morning though. So
Okay.
welcome to our meeting.
Yes, definitely. And plenty of opportunities to be able to provide comments, if not speaking directly, certainly through the other options that Jim had described previously. Let's go ahead then and move into approval of the minutes from May 13th, 2021. Everyone should have received those minutes, or certainly they were available online. Can I have a motion and a second to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Jay. Can I have a second?
Second. Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any corrections, comments, or discussion about the minutes? Okay, hearing none, we'll follow the process that there's been a motion and a second for approval. If there are no stated objections or abstentions, we will consider the action approved. Hearing none, we're good. All right, moving on to announcements and old business. Jim?
Have no announcements for today, and old business is resolved.
Okay.
Ooh.
All right. Let's move right into the action items then, if we could. The first action item is the UPWP and the scope of work for a variety of projects. If no one has any objections, what we can do is group these into a single action. Certainly, if any particular member would like to have a particular project removed or discussed separately, we can certainly do that. Are there any objections to grouping? Okay, I'm not hearing any objections. With that, can I have a motion to approve moving forward with this as a single action for approval?
I will move that. Jim Pond.
Okay.
Second.
Who was that on the second?
Jay.
Was it Jay? Okay, thank you, Jay. Okay, let's move ahead right into the presentations if we could. The first one is task 7213, Route 96 over Route 14, strategic divestment analysis. Jim, are you covering that one?
Yes, I am. So this project is being progressed by GTC staff on behalf of NISDA because we're looking at broader regional approaches as well. The Route 96 bridge over Route 14 was identified by NISDA Region 4 as being in need of repair. And they initially submitted the project for a TIP application for funding for the project. But there was the recognition that this is a potential for strategic divestment, as we've been discussing at various forums, and then leading into the long range plan. So at the time, Chris Reed from Region 4 withdrew the application so that this could be evaluated with the strategic divestment approach. And really what it comes down to is, rather than assuming that the current grade separated intersection is the best design, it'll be analyzed to determine if the feasibility of other designs, say, for example, a signalized intersection or roundabout, what opportunities may be more appropriate for the setting that can reduce life cycle costs and improve asset management. As you'll see in the scope of work that was provided in the package, you look at the graphic and you see it's a full cloverleaf interchange, essentially. What you might typically see on an expressway, certainly not on rural roads, even though they are the major roads for those area. So we will work with Ontario County, in particular with their planning office and the town of Phelps, to examine land use opportunities that might arise from the smaller intersection footprint. But what it's going to come down to is we'll use this intersection as a case study of how to examine existing infrastructure for a strategic divestment perspective. The idea, the bottom line question is, do the design decisions made decades ago still make sense today? So in that vein, we'll be developing, the consultant will develop a companion document that's sort of like a process of how do you go about doing these types of analysis? What are the factors that should be examined to determine if something else makes more sense? And I think in many places, it's going to be readily obvious that the existing design still makes sense. You know, a bridge going down the middle of crossing a stream on a straight segment really isn't probably not going to be anything different. But in places where we have excess infrastructure, excess lanes or pavement, anything like that, that might provide some opportunities, that's what we'll look at, as long as we can maintain servicing the transportation need. And the idea behind the companion document will be, can the process be replicated at other locations in our own region, perhaps other regions in the state, in New York State, or even other states if they want to emulate our process. So that's the intention with this. One of the things that we are looking at is the emphasis from the Federal Highway Administration on what they call planning environmental linkages, or PEL. It basically is following a process to document decisions in the planning stage that can then support the NEPA process if a project does move on to design and implementation. In order for us to do this, we would need to coordinate with NISTOT main office. So a decision has not been made yet on whether we would say this will be a PEL project, but the scope of work as presented here provides that flexibility, and we certainly can explore that as we get closer in coordination with Region 4 and main office. And Joel, did I miss anything?
No, Jim, I'd say you got it.
All right. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Are there any questions for Jim? All right. Hearing none, let's move into the presentation for task 7706, which is the West Webster Hamlet Revitalization Plan. I think Matt Chatfield or Josh Artuso were going to present.
Yes. This
Are
is
you there,
Josh
Josh?
Artuso. Yes, thank you. I had some trouble getting in, but yes, I'm in here and have ready to present. So, just a brief overview. The objective of this West Webster Hamlet Revitalization Plan is really to identify the strengths and identify some active transportation and safety improvements through increased connectivity and looking at the land use patterns and the existing zoning that exists. The study area is essentially bounded by Bay Road and Ridge Road, the intersection there to the east. It encompasses all of Old Ridge Road all the way to Route 404 Empire Boulevard, and some of the cross streets that intersect Old Ridge, including gravel road. So there's a lot of renewed interest in this particular area of town. Traditionally, the core of the West Webster hamlet is viewed by most to be located at the intersection of Old Ridge and Gravel. There's currently 2 vacant properties that have recently changed hands and represent really good redevelopment opportunities for that area. So what we want to do is really identify the existing infrastructure and any potential enhancements or improvements that could make it more pedestrian friendly. This area of town has a unique character to it in that it's a little bit denser than most neighborhoods. There's very short setbacks from the street, and all that really exists from a pedestrian or bicycle amenity standpoint is really just a small, I think it's 2 or 3 foot splash pad just adjacent to the road. So what we're hoping to do with this study is identify opportunities for transportation enhancements, take a look at our zoning regulations that cover this area. My original sense is that they don't really match or allow for they don't really promote or enhance the existing character of the neighborhood. So we will be looking at that as well. Furthermore, focusing on Empire Boulevard, there has been in recent years several pedestrian vehicular accidents, one in which resulted in a fatality. So we also want to focus our efforts on potential pedestrian and safety improvements along the 404 corridor that's within the study area of this project. So in terms of products, we're obviously going to produce a draft report as well as a final report. And within that final report would be an identification of vision, goals, and strategies for revitalization of the hamlet. Obviously, recommendations for transportation improvements. There are a couple focus areas that would probably have more specific development regulations and recommendations, primarily for that node at Ridge and Gravel that I mentioned earlier. And we're hoping that this would identify projects that would then put us in a better position to apply for future grant funding for implementation. So as a part of the project, an advisory committee will be formed. There will be a minimum of at least 3 public meetings during the course of the project. Matt and I actually held a somewhat informal brainstorming session with some interested stakeholders. I believe it was back in May.
That's correct.
So we'll probably tap into that group and probably build upon it to form the project advisory committee. And yeah, so that's the brief overview. Matt, did you have anything to add that I may have missed?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, in the goal of the study is historically there's just been a disconnect all over the board between the historical development forms, the current transportation infrastructure that's in place, and then the current land use regulations. So there's these 3 elements of land use regulations, transportation infrastructure, and current development form, and none of them match, right? Nothing works together. And as a result, on top of that, there's the marketplace, right? The development marketplace and the the real estate market that is, it's been chugging along, and it's left this area behind because there hasn't been any sort of formal organization in place of how, the traditional forces of the market should act in this area. And we're trying to, overcome all those disconnects. And we think that this project is the start of that.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Angela, I'd just like to interject. I just want to remind folks that this project was initially submitted as a UPWP project last fall, but we didn't have enough funding. But back in May, we presented the recognition that we had budget savings from last year. So we were able to achieve this, and the planning committee in May delegated to the UPWP development committee to pick a project basically. And one of the thing that, or a couple things that really resonated on this project were the, in essence, an equity component. This is probably the most economically depressed, if not, certainly one of the most economically depressed areas of the town.
Absolutely.
But they're also recognize that despite not getting UPWP funding, the town still continued to move forward. As Josh mentioned, the forum that was held with the stakeholders in the area, there was seen that there was still momentum there. And I think that's pretty obvious that it was only June 10th that the money was added to the UPWP by the board, and here we are. The next opportunity and a scope of work is presented. So there's a lot of momentum in the community that we're trying to capitalize on.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Josh and Matt. Are there any questions about this project or the scope that's been presented? No? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move into task 8543, which is the RGRTA Regional City and Village Local Service Study. I think, is Ken presenting on this one? Wassy?
Yes, I am, Angela.
Okay. Thanks, Ken.
Okay. Thanks, Angela, and good morning to everyone on the call. I'm Ken Boasi. I'm the Director of Regional Operations for RGRTA. And this study that I'm presenting this morning is a study that will take place in, or the beneficiary of the study is all of our counties except for Monroe County. So this is specifically for what we call the regional operations of RGRTA, and those are the counties of Orleans, Genesee, Wyoming, Livingston, Ontario, Seneca, Wayne. So that will be the focus of this study, and nothing we're doing in Monroe County right now. I'll start with the end result of what we're looking to accomplish in this study here is really to look at and find the best way to serve all of our villages and cities, populated areas within our rural counties right now. Right now, across the service area, we do serve most, if not all, of those areas of villages and cities within our service area in some fashion. There's a variety of service options there, anything from traditional dial-a-ride demand response type service where reservations are needed 24 hours in advance to some villages just have a route that passes by maybe once or twice a day, and there's some other villages and cities, so Batavia, Canandaigua, for example, that have service that runs every hour or every 45 minutes throughout that city or village. So this study is to look at the way we're doing service in all of those areas, and are we doing it the best way that we possibly can? Are we doing it in a way that is just okay and we can do a lot better in some of these areas, or are we not meeting the needs that exist in those areas, and what will we need to do to actually meet the needs in those areas? So the whole point of this is, again, to find out what we really can do to serve these communities better throughout our 8-county area. I think a lot of some of the people, the folks on this call, may have actually been involved in our previous UPWP study for our rural counties that went on in 2016 and 2017 timeframe. This study differs from that in that the previous study was looking holistically at the whole area, at the whole service area, but also looking for opportunities to find efficiencies there, and maybe there were some duplicate services here and there, and how we could better use our available funding in places that were may possibly have duplicate services. And it was not specific to villages or cities. That was looking at entire areas of counties, populated areas, employers, everything like that. This was more focused on the populated areas throughout our the 7-county region that we provide service in right now. The work plan is we will hire a consultant. We'll create an RFP, hire a consultant to do this study for us. RGRTA staff will work with the consultant directly on, and there will be the advisory committee that consists of staff here and a member of the GTC staff as well. We do plan not only looking at our data that we have internally based on ridership and various trends that we see, but also encouraging the consultant to use the latest in terms of census data and whatever else out there is from either census or the ACS or whatever any of the municipalities would provide us as far as input, whether it is data they have or in some cases just the anecdotal things that they hear from constituents that do live in these areas. We are planning, as part of the study, public outreach in all of the counties, or more specifically in the actual locations, villages, cities, where we are studying where changes may be made, where service may be increased, to provide input to the study, but not all, but also to inform the community what is, as the study progresses, what is going on. And some of the paths we might actually take through there. So again, like I said, end result, we're looking to serve all these communities better. Primarily, this started actually as if we can just run route service within some of the villages or cities. That was the initial idea. We've taken that a little further, which is in the scope of work to not only look at are we going to try to do route service or village circulator service within that area, or ever since here in Monroe County, within the last few months, we've started the Reimagine RTS project, or we've started the Reimagine RTS service, I should say. The project had been ongoing for about 5 years, but we've looked at, as part of that, starting an on-demand service here in Monroe County in certain areas, and that's gone fairly well. So one of the ideas would also be to look at if a particular city or village does need more service or better service, instead of just restricting ourselves to either deviated route service or dial-a-ride, to start investigating if the on-demand service, similar to what we're doing in Monroe County, would also be an option for some of these areas. So the original, the objective that's up on the screen right now does have circulator routes, and that's still certainly something we are interested in knowing if that is the best option for a certain place. But if that is not the best option, then what is the best option? Is it what we're doing right now? Is it something that possibly we've never done before in our rural communities, but would be interested in bringing that out to those areas as well? So that pretty much concludes what I had, Angela. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Certainly. Thank you, Ken. It's a much needed project. Thank you for your efforts in this. Are there any questions for Ken on what's been presented? No. Okay. Hearing none, then thank you, Ken. We'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, Angela.
Yep, task 8768, the Monroe County Countywide Active Transportation Plan. I think Ishan Lin was going to present on that one.
Yes, Angela, thank you. Hello all. My name is Yishen Lin, planner with Monroe County Planning and Development. I'm here today to present the scope of the Monroe County countywide active transportation plan for your consideration. Before I start the scope of the project, I'd like to share two personal stories. The first one is when I came to Rochester 12 years ago. I was exploring the city and I walked on Highland Avenue. And the sidewalk, I walk on the sidewalk, very pleasant, but suddenly the sidewalk just disappeared. And later on, I talked to some friends. I said, oh, you must be in the Boulder or Rochester or Brighton or something. So that's one story I talk to people often. And the second one, in this town, few years later, I was my kid in a stroller in a sunny Rochester winter day, snow pile up the sidewalk, and it's pretty pleasant. Like we try to walk to a library on Elmwood Avenue. I know there's a lot of sidewalk, shouldn't have any problem, but unfortunately there's about 100 feet of the Elmwood have no sidewalk. So those frustrated experience, I'm sure I share with many people who live in the area. So that's why, I'm very excited and think it's much needed, a countywide active transportation plan to improve the infrastructure and the connectivity and the comfortable, safer pedestrian and cyclist environment. So I will start with about this project. So the Monroe County countywide active transportation plan will include all the towns and village and the city. So there's 20 towns, 9 villages, and 1 city in Monroe County. The goal of this project is to develop a planning document to guide the county departments and the county agencies and the whole community, the local municipalities, to implement a countywide network of cycling and pedestrian facilities, programs, and policies to build a more comfortable, safer, and equitable environment for pedestrians and cyclists. The completion of this project will result in a document with ditches, all the existing mobility and active transportation plans that have already been created by local municipalities. So I think that's about an overturned town and village citywide active transportation plans have been created. So we would like to take all the existing studies and make it a more holistic countywide plan to bridge the gap. And also the plan will complement the Reimagine RTS initiatives, routes, and schedules. The objective of this plan is also want to provide resources and identify implement strategies to improve the overall active transportation system in Monroe County. The completed countywide active transportation plan would provide 5 community resources to support active transportation. First, will provide an aspirational framework on including active transportation facilities in transit corridor. Second, provide a general guideline for applying active transportation principles. Third, provide ideas and resources to improve the integration of active transportation and public transit to support regional connectivity. Fourth, provide best practice for planning and design and project development approaches for pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure. Last but not least, the plan will provide guidance on local and regional actions that support active transportation. And the implementation strategy will be an important part of the plan. So this plan would identify components that helps the implementation of the plan. First, we would identify opportunity areas to innovative bicycle and pedestrian facility program. And second, we would identify strategies and funding programs that the county and the local municipalities can lead and partner with. And the third is to identify roles and responsibilities for the county, local municipalities, and other partners and local agencies in facilitate to implement the active transportation strategies. And we believe that with this countywide planning effort, we will create a more cooperation between the municipalities on active transportation issues and provide a channel for municipality to collaborate on, talk to each other, gain experience from each other, and we can build a more connected and cohesive countywide active transportation network. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Ishan. Are there any questions about the scope of work or the project in general?
Angel, I just want to add a comment. Folks may remember at the earlier, it was either the April or May meeting, the city of Rochester had presented a scope of work on an active transportation plan. That is moving through the RFQ process right now, but the county, Monroe County and city of Rochester have been in regular communications with the two different studies and looking to make sure they're coordinated as they move forward. Those efforts are already underway.
Okay, great, thanks.
That's correct, Jim. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Ishan, just rest assured out in the rural counties, we got the same problem. Sidewalks that just stop in the middle of nowhere. I think all the bridges that went nowhere, they finally got rid of. But if you travel other parts of the Northeast, there are infrastructure pieces that just don't have any sense, but we spent billions of dollars on them. Welcome to America.
It's always a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, constantly.
Yeah, thank you. So we have 4 projects, all very good projects. Thank you all for your presentations. I'll ask one last time if there are any questions on any of the projects. Okay, hearing none. We did have a motion to approve and a second. Are there any objections to that? Any abstentions? Nope. Okay, well, we will consider the action approved then. Moving on to item 2, which is a recommendation concerning the completed tasks. And the one project that we have for consideration today is the Monroe County Land Use Monitoring for 2020. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Jay. Can I have a second?
Joel Kleinberg, second.
Thank you, Joel. Can we move forward with discussion and presentation, please? Ishan, are you doing this one too?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, can I have the presentation? Is this the okay? Hey, hi, I'm Ishan Lin again. If you're here 5 minutes ago, so I'm Ishan Lin, planner with the Monroe County Planning Development. I'm here today to present the UPWP program task 4210-2020 Monroe County Land Use Monitoring Report. This is the 28th year that Monroe County collecting and compiling the development data with the support of UPWP program. I would like to start the presentation with some background of this report, especially for those not familiar with this project. The tasks to complete this report include identify proposed major projects on an annual basis and conduct an annual outreach with all towns, villages, and cities in Monroe County to receive updated information. The data presented in the report is available for use in updating the land use data in GTC's travel demand model and can be used for the analysis for economic activity and trends. 3 data sources were used in this report. Major projects submitted for review under New York State Municipal Law 239 in the year of 2020. Second one is the residential building permits issued in 2020. We're collecting the permit data in conjunction with the GFL. So using their annual permit data surveys. The last is the Monroe County real property data. The following slides, I will provide some snapshots or some highlights of this year's report. Next slide, please. Next. First is the major projects in 2020. So the minimum threshold for the major project is 5 or more residential lots or dwelling units or project more than 5,000 square foot of non-residential projects and rezoning for an area 10 acres or more. So a total of 97 major projects were proposed in Monroe County in 2020. 36% of them are for residential projects and 32% are for commercial projects. 18% for industrial projects and public service, mixed use, recreational, and institutional make up the rest of the 14%. Next slide, please. We will continue to observe and study the growth of the local municipalities in major project development. Town of Henrietta and Town of Greece proposed the most major projects in the last 4 years. Henrietta had 51 major projects and Greece have 40 projects in the last 4 years. And again, Town of Gates in 2019 report, we pointed out that Town of Gates have a significant growth in major projects. And this year in 2020, we still can see the growth is still continue, even with a slight decrease from 10 in 2019 to 6 in 2020. Other municipalities that have high concentration of proposed major projects are Arundequay, Rochester, Penfield, and Chi-Line. And also another thing I would like to note is 24 out of 30 municipalities have at least one major project in 2020. So we can see the major project has been distributed broadly in Monroe County. And the next slide, I would like to show the history residential permit data. The data we have is from 2004 and to 2020. So this chart including total residential permit data in blue, the single family permit data in red, and the multi-family permit data in gray, kind of in the bottom of the lines there. So the 16-year data shows the single family permit is trending down, and the issuance of the multi-family permit is barely trending up, just a little bit trending up. So even though the multi-family permit growth trend line doesn't appear to match the decline of the single family permits, we also have to take into the consideration that one multi-family permit can generate much more housing units compared to single families. So from this historical data gathered here, we learned that the number of single family housing decreasing and the multi-family housing is increasing slowly. So we just want to take a lens and we'll continue to study. We did notice the single family in 2020 have a little increase. And from now, it's hard to tell if it is the start of the trend to going up. So we will continue the study in the following years. Lastly, I think it would be ignorant to wrap up the 2020 report without addressing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this year, Monroe County Land Use Monitoring Report added a section to try to learn more about the pandemic impact on the local project development. For this, we are looking at two elements of the data. One is the total number of major projects, and the other is the types of development. The data based on the number of major projects proposed. There's no unusual change of the year 2020. You can see that in 2020, we have 97 projects, and compared to 100 in 2017, 92 in 2018, and 2019 we have 111 major projects. There's no unusual change of the year 2020, but we also would like to recognize that a lot of big projects requires many years of plan, so it might be too early to see the change of the impact. The second chart in the bottom, we all know the impact of the pandemic had infiltrated to our daily life, including how we work, shop, and learn. So we like to take another lens at development types and then more about the development types evolved before, during, and after the pandemic. So the chart in the lower here, see the curve, are showing three development types in Monroe County. The three major one is residential. In blue, the red is for commercial, and the gray is for industrial. So over the 4 years, we started the last 4 years for 2017, 18, 19, and 2020 data. We can see the residential and the commercial project have very strong correlation. The commercial project increased when the residential project increased. The residential project from the 4-year data has have a slight lead in the last 4 years. However, the trend is showing that the gap between the residential and commercial is trending smaller. There was some increase of the industrial project in 2020. So 2020, we received 17 industrial proposed major projects. Last 3 years, we have average of 10 projects. So there's some significant increase. Could this be the effect of the pandemic? We just need more data to support this. It will be an assumption. So we need more data to support this. So in the end, just like the total, we want to address that the total time lag for the impact of the pandemic might take more than a year or 2 or 3 years. And, we are technically still in the pandemic. So Monroe County Planning intended to continue monitor the major project counts and development trends in the next few years. So we will be better understanding and prepare post-pandemic. In the end, the report also includes a series of informative tables and maps. Yes, a list of tables will be included in the report. The tables will have detailed information of the 97 major projects proposed in 2020. Also, we have all active major projects proposed from 2003 to 2020. and there will be a detailed report of potential development projects from the input from the local communities. And there are maps to illustrate the data are also included in this report. The hard copies of the report will be distributed to all municipalities in Monroe County and other interest parties. And the report in PDF format are also available for download on the Monroe County website and GTC website. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishan. Are there any questions or comments? It's a very interesting report. It'll be interesting to see what your trends are going to show. It'll also be interesting to see how that compares to the population and demographic information as that starts to roll out as well. So thank you, Ishan. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we did have a question in the chat box. So Jay Gazelle asked, how would a mixed-use project with ground floor commercial and upper floors residential be counted within the development types?
Great question, Jay. So we're not sure if we all recall, mixed use project is a kind of a new type of project. So right now we have a category for mixed use projects. So last year, I think we have like 3 mixed use projects were proposed. And so this will be will be taken into consideration for next year. We will be able to separate them, maybe use, we need to, will be separate them, counted as a commercial or residential. So it would be our next discussion. But for now, there's a separate category for mixed use projects.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll vote on the matter. We do have a motion to approve and a second. Are there any objections to that? Hearing none, are there any abstentions? Okay, we'll consider the action approved. Thank you, Ishan.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. We're going to go ahead now and move into the action items for the TIP modifications. So we have in this scenario, we have opportunity to do 2 groupings for voting on this one. What I would like to recommend is that we group items A through Q, which are resolutions 21-17 through 21-33, with the exception that item number H, which is 21-24, has been withdrawn, and it's going to be considered under resolution 2178. The second grouping of items would be for new action items that were not part of the agenda package. So that would be new. So in terms of items A through Q minus H, everyone received that information in their packet. The TDC did review them and did provide or recommend favorable action for those. So I'm going to ask if there are any objections to the grouping as I described. Nope. Okay. Then if we could proceed with a motion for approval on items A through Q.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it, Bill Wright.
Bill Kleinberg, second.
Thank you, Bill. And shall we proceed with any presentations or discussion on any of the items?
Angela, I just did want to add a comment that these are the first batch are planning committee actions. They're administrative modifications that are relatively minor with the authority designated to the delegated to the planning committee. And as Angela said, they were all vetted by the TIP development committee.
Okay. Okay, I'm not hearing any questions regarding any of the modifications. Again, this would be grouping of A through Q, not including H, which was resolution 2124. Are there any objections to the approval? Any abstentions? Hearing none, we'll consider the action approved. Moving into the second set or second group. Again, these are new resolutions. If anybody has any objections to grouping these, we can certainly pull any of these out if you do. Again, I'll ask, does anybody have any objections with that group?
Andrew, I just wanted to clarify, we have, so at first, what we just did a moment ago was planning committee actions. Now we're moving into council resolutions where the planning committee is making a recommendation. So resolutions 21-53 all the way through to 74 were provided in the package, and those are existing, but we do have a few new ones to be considered. So it's, I think we're looking at 3 separate actions.
Thank you, Jim. I jumped ahead, didn't I?
That's okay.
I jumped ahead on everybody. I'm sorry for the confusion. So then for the items, yes. So we've got A, which 21 through 53 and 21 through 74, correct?
Angela, with the exception of 2173, and we'll take that, and if we can take that 2173 with 2178, 2179, and 2180. We can walk through those individually after the initial action.
Okay, so we then go ahead then and proceed.
We do need a motion second to get the TIP amendments on the table.
Okay, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jay. And a second.
Joel Kleinberg, second.
Thank you. I apologize for the confusion. Can we please go ahead and proceed with presentation and discussions?
You're doing fine, Angela.
Yeah, right. Okay. Moving on.
I just want to offer an overall commentary. We're dealing with the federal fiscal year within the TIP. Federal fiscal year expires on September 30th, but in order to ensure all the necessary actions can be taken and processed through the system at both the state and federal level, there is a cutoff for transactions of September 10th. But before they can even be submitted there needs to be some processing at the regional level. So project sponsors are submitting all their changes and authorization requests to Region 4 by August 31st. What we're trying to do is set up the frame, we call it setting the table for the next federal fiscal year, because the feds will evaluate the region on how well we achieve what we set out to do. So did you say you're going to do 20 projects, and did you do 20 projects? So in the past, we've had I guess would be criticism within our certification reviews where, hey, your unamended TIP performance is not as good as it can be. And then we came to realization that while we were thinking the TIP that we adopt every 3 or 4 years and that we amend every quarter was what they were talking about, we came to learn that no, on October 1st of each year, they basically reset what they're looking at. So we started more aggressively coordinate with project sponsors in the summer to line up the next federal fiscal year. And that is why you see our board meeting actually happening in late August as opposed to September, to give us that time to realign things. So what you see on these is primarily about realigning the program, where some projects needed to slip, be delayed because of whatever project development activities came into be. We look for opportunities to accelerate on other projects. One example is the South Lion Street Bridge in Batavia. The Genesee County continued to progress that design on an aggressive schedule. So with the funding opening up, we're able to accelerate that bridge replacement a full year, which benefits the community. And so we are oftentimes at the TDC talking about projects in the pipeline. And this is the importance of continuing to progress designs. And the last time around, we were talking about preventive maintenance projects and getting the design and construction realigned for specific locations. So aggressive efforts on the part of the TIP Development Committee on behalf of the region to realign things, to take advantage of in this case, new money coming to the region from statewide sources that free up regional funds. Let's take advantage of using those, and then endeavoring to use as much of the current year funds as possible before the access to them goes away on in September. And it's a giant puzzle where you move, because we're constrained each year on the amount of dollars available, and then across all years for any individual source. When we are using regional funds, it's not as simple as, oh yeah, we can just move things around. If something is being deferred, something else needs to be accelerated to backfill.
Any questions for Jim on that? No? Okay, moving along.
Sure. Angela, we'll maybe let each of the sponsors talk about the 4 additional projects for consideration.
Okay, that sounds good. I think the next one is increasing the total cost of the 408 at I-390 interchange project. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, this first one here is the changes to modifications to resolution 2173 by NISDOT.
Okay.
Okay, sounds like I'm up. So this is Joel Kleinberg. Good morning. I will be speaking on this project, but it's actually a federal project. Since our partners are not on the line, I will do my best to speak to this one. The project was, so it's designed by the Eastern Federal Lands Division of the Federal Highway Administration. They designed the project and reached PS&E on schedule, so everything was proceeding beautifully. And then we learned that the Eastern Federal Lands Division of the Federal Highway Administration does not use the same financial system as the rest of the Federal Highway Administration. As a result, there was no way for DOT to transfer funds from our agency to theirs. So despite doing everything right, we got caught up right at the end. So unfortunately, this project needs to defer both the federal fiscal year and also a construction season. The project is on Route 63, which is a DOT-maintained facility, but again is being delivered by the federal government. So we spoke to our partners in NISDOT main office, and they told us how to account for this project on the ESTIP, the mechanism we use to communicate our finances to the federal government. So you'll see we're deleting the construction inspection phase, and it looks like there's a construction increase. There is no increase. We're just moving all the money onto one phase to make it easier, less record keeping. And again, unfortunately, also to defer the phase a year, just so that DOT now has a mechanism, New York State DOT now has a mechanism to provide the funding to the federal government to deliver this project. And it's worth noting all of these funds are statewide funds. These are not planning target funds. They do not impact any other funds that would be available to other projects. So any questions on the FLAP project, the Federal Lands Access Project?
Joel, pardon my naivete. What's toll credits when it comes to this allocation of funds? Did the Thruway Authority decide to run part of through the reservation? I mean, the Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge?
Not to my knowledge, though they're also not on the line. No, so toll credits, and Jim, maybe you can even describe better than I can, but it is a funding mechanism that New York State is able to take advantage of that allows us to use 100% federal in lieu of using New York State funds to match. So, yep, so typically projects are, for most fund sources, 80% federal, 20 cents on the dollar comes from New York State, for example. In this case, we're applying toll credits, which is literally that, it's a credit, instead of using state funds.
And Jay, this is a recognition from the federal government that state resources were used to build portions of the interstate system that would normally be eligible for federal funds. So that's where the credits come in to say, okay, we'll use state resources, non-federal sources to build that. So over the years, New York State has accumulated a balance of credits. So when it comes time to actually pay the bill, instead of paying the contractor, instead of 20% cash coming out of state coffers, it's they're cashing in their chips with their toll credits, and the feds pay the full bill.
All right. Moving on to the next project, increasing the total cost of the Route 408 at I-390 Interchange project. Who's going to present this one?
Joel, again, I'll assume that's me. And I think the note at the bottom is the key point here. There were quite a number of projects lately where NYSDOT main office has provided funding to give additional accomplishment to the region. So again, there are no new no impact to planning targets. These are NYSDOT main office managed funds. We are adding a culvert into this project. I believe it's a full replacement of the culvert. And so everywhere that you see an increase in construction cost, those are 100% NYSDOT main office managed funds. It's a mixture of an odd mixture, but a mixture of federal aid and New York State funds. And what's nice about this one is actually we are providing. Actually, I'm sorry, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong. Are we taking $207,000 from available balances or providing it back to it?
That's being taken $207,000 of NHP balances in 22.
Okay. I'm quickly scanning to try to remember why we had to ask for that. I'm thinking it is because of construction inspection. So this is probably going to move from a 1-year delivery to a 2-year delivery. And so I'm thinking that's the reason we had to ask for extra federal aid.
Yeah, and so just to clarify there, the main office came in with additional funding that helped us achieve the culvert and additional state funds, but there still was a relatively small balance of the $207,000 needed to fully fund the project out of a total of nearly $6 million. We're grabbing an additional. Well, I guess the increase, we should focus on that. So an increase of a few $100,000, and we're using $200,000 from our regional balance, but significant amounts from outside of the regional balance. And there's more than sufficient balance in the National Highway Performance Program to cover that. And we'll have a financial crosswalk after we talk about some projects.
Do we have any questions on that one that have come up? Any more discussion? I want to say I'm seeing a question somewhere.
That was a question in the chat for sort of general balances, and we'll answer that one after we go through these individual projects and motion.
Okay. Then do you want to move on to the next one then?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. That's okay. That's all right. So we're looking at increasing the total cost of the Route 15A East Henrietta Road from I-90 throughway to I-390 project. Joel, is this you again?
This is me again, and I'll keep it short because it's the exact same situation as the last one. As main office provided some funds so we could add a culvert to the project. And so again, in this case, 100% of the increase is state main office managed funds, no impact to planning target at all.
Okay. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, and just to clarify, so again, it's another culvert replacement being delivered as part of a highway paving project.
Okay. And the last one is deferring a phase of the Lakeshore Drive and Route 364 sidewalks project, Ontario County.
Good morning, this is Tim McElligott. I'll take this one. This is a project in the city and town of Canandaigua. It's a TAP project to install sidewalks along those road segments. We have had we've experienced some challenging right-of-way negotiations with an adjacent property owner that have resulted in us coming right up against the timeline that Jim mentioned before, the August 31st timeline. We do have an agreement with the purchase for the purchase of the property. However, we still need to finalize a few items, specific items to the right-of-way closing documents. So we're working closely with our right-of-way consultant to get that done, but we are afraid that we will not be able to deliver a right-of-way certification with a box B checked prior to this August 31st deadline, which we really need to back up a little bit more than a week to allow the DOT to pull it all together. So what we're asking for is to move the construction phase of this project from federal fiscal year 21 to federal fiscal year 22 to protect the construction dollars. We anticipate finishing the right-of-way within a short period of time here, but we probably will not hit this August 31st deadline. So that's it.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that these the funds for this project are specific to the project, so they're not available to any other project, and this change does not affect any other project. However, we do want to take the approach that, in essence, this is kind of contingent. The county and state DOT are still working to make this right-of-way transfer, making the paperwork complete. If that happens in the next week, we can always pull this from the agenda on the board. But if it doesn't happen, our next opportunity to do an amendment would be December, and that would really throw off project schedule. So, this is just an effort to cover our bases just in case that transaction doesn't happen in time. And I think in some respects it would actually slow things down, because if we have to move the construction phase, they won't be able to act to pull the trigger on that until after October 1st. So they would, probably lose a month within the schedule, 4 to 6 weeks. So like I said, they're still trying to make it happen.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Moving on, I guess, in terms of just kind of wanting to clarify here on this, well, go ahead, Jim. I'm looking at moving into the voting, but I'm seeing the planning targets are up here. How do you want to
Sure.
discuss that?
I
Okay.
just wanted to provide an overall summary of what's kind of the beginning balances at this quarter and what the updated balances will be. Really, we've had a shift of balances out of 23 into 22. So, we've had a number of deferrals this quarter, but we've also advanced projects as well. You know, through projects that were adopted even just last quarter as part of our preventative maintenance reserve. So as we enter in 22, we'll still look to advance potentially other phases, start new projects that might become adopted as part of our next tip, and look for some of these other opportunities right now. But so 2022 is still going to be something we're going to be addressing over the course of the next year.
And Alex, before we move off this slide, I just wanted to reflect back to what I said earlier, where the TDC worked really hard to try to maximize the use of the funds from the current federal fiscal year. And when you look at the FHWA total down at the bottom for 2021, you'll see $193,000 left on the table out of an original, about 80 million, I think, across all fund sources. So we really squeezed out everything we could to fully utilize those balances. And at some point in the future, that 193 gets recast back to us, but we don't know how long it's going to take to get that. So rather than sending a couple million back to the to Albany, we're sending less than 200,000 back to Albany. So that's quite an accomplishment. And then it also shows what I was talking about earlier with any given year. So our columns, we cannot be overspent on the bottom line. So that updated balance, very bottom, you'll see each year where we're in the black. And then for any individual fund source, we have to look over to the across the rows and see the 5-year total. So we're in the black on all the fund sources, but we've also have some capacity to do some more work coming up. We did get a question over the chat from Terry Rice joining us via the publicinput.com. Looking at the tip offset table, looks like there's a significant amount in various fund sources not committed in 22 in STP Flex, Large Urban, National Highway Performance Program, and Safety. Total about 9.6 million. This he's looking at what was on the website. We had a few changes with those projects that were just added, so we're down to about 9.4 million. I know in June the committee identified several new projects throughout the region. Are you going to go look to do so again for large amounts in 2022? Short answer, yes. We'll work with the TIP Development Committee. Later in the meeting, I'll give a recap on the federal legislative front. So in all honesty, having this $9.4 million in the federal fiscal year that starts in October could perhaps position us to get a jump start on some design activities to take advantage of increased resources in the new transportation legislation. So it's a good place to be. The committee did look, well, I should say Alex and Joel and Jeff Giambardino at Region 4 and the TIP committee, we did look at what existing projects are out there that have any phases that can accelerate. Typically, the ones that have the biggest impact are construction phases. But you can't just accelerate a construction phase. It takes time to conduct the engineering, to go through the process. It takes time to acquire land, to satisfy environmental rules, to satisfy right-of-way acquisition and the like. So certain milestones need to be achieved before you can move on. So it's not simply, we'll just throw more money at it. In a lot of cases, it's time. So we look to accelerate whatever we could from 23 into 22. And I think we even looked at potential for accelerating 24. but the 2023 year is fairly well fully programmed. I mean, as it stands, we're looking at 146,000 out of somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 million. So there's not any flexibility in 23, but the 22 we have capacity, like I said, to get a jump start on potentially on some design activity and take fuller advantage of new opportunities coming down the pipe. Alex, I'm not sure what the next slide is. Is that statewide programs or something?
The next slide is our motion.
Okay, this is for the second group that we just heard presentation on. Can I have I think in this case, we didn't have a motion for approval yet on this section. So if I could have a motion for approval of proposed resolutions 21-73 as modified and 21-78 through 21-80, amending the federal fiscal year 2020 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program.
So moved.
Thank you, Jay. Can I have a second?
This is Rochelle. I second.
Thank you, Rochelle. Again, same thing. Are there any objections to the approval? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Hearing none. Motion stands approved. Thank you. Okay. TIP procedures manual and introduction for that. I think, Jim, is that you?
Actually, it's going to be Alex, but just to avoid what we just happened, let's get a motion and second to get it on the floor.
Okay, can I have a motion and to get it on the floor, please?
So moved. I'll continue my streak here.
Thank you, Jay. Can I have a second?
From Jim Pond, you got a second.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Angela. Today, I wanted to discuss a series of updates to the TIP procedures manual, our governing procedures document for the updating and managing the TIP. The last update we had in 2018 was on covering some changes to TIP management, particularly with streamlining some of the amendment processes and administrative modifications, and created what we now call staff modifications, really the simplest, lowest hanging fruit of changes. We decided to take a full look at some of the procedures manual here so we could incorporate some updates, really refresh the document with latest federal authorization regulations, incorporating the changes from the upcoming, recently adopted LRTP, our conformity status. And as well, this procedures manual is really the result of a number of discussions we've been having with the TIP Development Committee on managing the TIP as well. So we can have an updated understanding and consensus on what changes merit what level of scrutiny and need to be decided by which committee. So the TIP procedures manual is broken down into 5 major sections. There are some changes and on the change column, you see the types of updates that were made to that. In sections 1 and 2 were just updated references and both federal and our regional documents. On the TIP development side, as part of every TIP update, the TIP development, we added a section under mode evaluation. Currently, when we develop the TIP, we have tiered lists of projects that are separated by mode. We just wanted to put into the procedures manual that guarantee that we can come up with multiple types of lists, just so we have different valences which through to rank and assess projects. Section 3.42, air quality conformity. We updated the manual to reflect our latest status as an orphan area for non-attainment. Wonky, but clarifying. and program evaluation related to performance measures, since we now have national performance measures. And these need to be incorporated into the TIP. We'll also put that into that process of describing how we'll achieve progress towards meeting the targets that our board has adopted into the TIP development. TIP management, this is clearly where most of the changes in the TD discussion has been focused. Project scope, we wanted to really clarify the difference between changes to project scope for really major amendments versus bridge or highway treatments. Whether, for example, you could have bridge rehabilitations that if you just add one more change to an element, it becomes a full reconstruction. So we wanted to make sure that when we go out to the public and we say we're really amending a project or we're having a major significant change, what that is. And we leaned on the definition from the Code of Federal Regulations. Change of cost. We've been using planning target versus main office funds, even though they still may be the same surface transportation block grant funds. We wanted to make sure we truly distinguish both in the manual and our processes which projects, where the source of those funds comes from. And so when we're making some actions, main office projects, we've given less scrutiny to because the funds are more tied specifically to those projects. So we wanted to make sure that we add that distinction, even though the funding programs may be the same, NHPP, STBG, Highway Safety Improvement Program, just so we know what's coming out of our regional planning target budget and what's coming down through Albany. 4.25, air quality conformity, just distinguishing non-exempt projects. Exhibit 4, project changes. So which projects will be staff modifications, planning committee resolutions, board resolutions as full amendments. We'll go over that next. And programs, we just updated the list of programs there to show what's currently in the FAST Act. So Exhibit 4, so for each type of change, project status, project scope, we'll see we'll have the TIP amendment, administrative modification, and staff modification. So if anybody has any notes, any questions on these are all pretty basic. Changes in project cost. This is where we're really distinguishing thresholds for planning target versus main office funds. So if there's a more significant amount of planning office funds being increased, of planning target funds being increased, that will move to the board versus main office funds, which are tied to the project that don't have any impact to us regionally. Changes in project schedule. There's no changes to what is previously there. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a typo error about typos. Let's get on to the next page. And then other staff modifications, no change as well. Change of project name, project description that doesn't have anything to do with scope, and changes like this. So we're still maintaining the same types of amendments and the just with some really key distinctions focused primarily on project cost thresholds and type and which are the source of funds. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Alex? No? Can we proceed to voting on this one then? Okay. And this case, I have a recommendation or motion for approval of proposed resolution 21-75, revising the Transportation Improvement Program and Procedures Manual.
Angel, we actually already have that. Jay Gazelle motioned and Jim Bond seconded, so now it's just a vote.
Okay.
Wants to flip on that, Jim? You take it first, and then I'll do the second.
I like need coffee today or something, guys, I'm telling you. Okay, so then, same thing. Are there any objections to the approval? None? Okay, any abstentions? Okay, then we will consider the action approved. Moving on to the long-range transportation plan, correct? No.
Yeah, that is just
Yep.
a standing item within our agenda structure, but we just adopted a new plan in June, so there's no actions on the long-range plan.
All right. All right, so then the next item is recommendation to the GTC board concerning amending the National Performance Measures Report for the Genesee Finger Lakes region. Can I have a motion to approve on this?
I'll move it, Bill Wright.
Thank you, Bill. Can I have a second?
Second, Eric.
Thank you. Can we move into the presentation, please? Alex?
Thank you, Angela. So for this quarter, we have a couple of updates to the performance measures report. Since we've been bringing performance measures to this committee as part of a multi-tracked schedule of different performance measures that have come out of the federal rulemaking. Setting the highway safety targets for the statewide level. This is the fourth iteration of these we've done. These are updated on an annual basis. And also today we will be considering recommending transit safety measures and targets. As noted on the slide here, this is the last performance measure to be added from the FAST Act. It seems disorganized, but we apologize for having kind of a complicated rulemaking process. So we're really excited to be moving towards now having these on the performance measures report and sort of reporting and assessing on a hopefully more routine schedule. So for 2022, the safety targets, the measures are still the same. And there is changing the target set from 21 to 22. I'll note, I'll talk a little bit here about some of the changes in serious injury factors, and these are the targets. There's been a less, 21 was set on a more aggressive reduction of serious injuries than 22. So as part of the, so looking at a rolling 5-year total and then picking a trend line, then picking a percentage reduction, 21 was used at a higher percentage of about 3% versus 22, which is at a 1% amount. So there's not, there's not a measure setting an increase in these, but it is higher relatively.
Hey, Alex, Jim Pine, question. What area does that cover?
This is the state. I'm sorry, yeah, Jim, great question. This is the statewide level. So this is us looking, setting these at the statewide level. So we accept these measures as supporting the state's efforts. So how we program our HSIP funds and work towards these targets throughout our transportation improvement program. So for highway safety, this is the first time actually we've had, when we first adopted these measures and targets in 2017, we set in 2018, we set a 2019 target. So from when we set the baseline and then the targets, the baselines have mostly gone down, but with the exception of serious injuries at the statewide level. And this is the first time that we've had a target set and really had the actual year numbers come for comparison's sake. So this was the target for the rolling 5-year target, but the actual rolling 5-year average was higher in a couple out of these 5. And there's some, in talking with NYSA main office through the New York State Association NPO's safety working group, there's a couple of reasons why there's been a distinction in the reporting of serious injuries. And there have been some areas of the state that have been driving that more. So this is the compilation of crash reporting across the statewide level. There's a bit of some statistics and reporting behind that. And we're going to be looking at this year over year. So be looking to see more to come and maybe some more stable reporting so we can, because serious injury numbers kind of go up and down every year more than different trend lines like we've been seeing for fatalities. So there's some work to do on that as New York State has a more national severity scale. And this is something other states have had too, as states nationally move towards a common severity scale. And what we'll talk about perhaps in some coming months too is an HSIP implementation plan. Since New York State, we have not met the targets and made progress on at least 4 out of those 5 targets. Main office will be submitting an implementation plan where they'll talk about what as a state we're doing to support and strengthen our overall strategic highway safety plan. And a couple of points I do want to notice is that we've had the pedestrian safety action plan as one of the first of the sub-emphasis area plans that's really drilled into a particular emphasis area. There's going to be, in the near future, an intersection safety action plan getting started, and a draft lane departures action plan should be coming out in the next few months. So we're looking to share some more with that. And there are actually discussions too to have a second version, an update of the pedestrian safety action plan as well, PSAP 2.0.
Alex, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but just, are they looking at the parts of the state that have the biggest deficits and sending the most money there? Is that kind of the thinking? Do you know?
As part of not meeting the thresholds, there may be some changes to formula funds and how much like obligation authority is. We'll provide some more update on that, because that's really kind of way down in the bullets of the regulations, kind of impacts on formulas.
Yeah.
But we can.
If I can help respond to that. So basically what the timing we have going on now, every year when they get an additional year of crash data, they rerun the statistical analysis and set their targets based on that. You might, one reporting period to the next, you might not have a drop from one to the other, but there still is a goal to drop from the actual 5-year average. The other thing we run into is the state is required, they have certain deadlines of when they have to submit as part of the highway performance monitoring system and the safe target. So what the state DOT and the governor's traffic safety committee, their deadlines are such that, okay, they've announced their new targets. So we have committed as a region to adopt statewide targets and program projects in support of that, as opposed to trying to draw out our own separate regional targets. And I cite, one of the reasons for that, if you might recall, a few years ago in Livingston County, there's a tragedy where there was, I think it was a youth hockey team, maybe out of Canada, driving down 390 and there was a dump truck parked on the shoulder. The bus drifted in. Significant number of injuries. And if we were to say, as a region, set a target, that would have totally blown the target. Another situation, unfortunately, was that last year or the summer before, summer 2019, with the limousine crash not far from Schoharie. That was, I think, 19 fatalities in one crash. That hit in any single region would totally blow the target. So we know at a statewide level, things are going to happen in different places across the state, but hopefully we're constantly trying to hit those areas so we can focus on them. The safety programs, the way we are generally have to proceed our reaction to a problem afterward. We can't have, potential safety issues get fixed. We have to have actual safety issues. But Alex talked about the emphasis area and the systemic, what we did with the pedestrian safety action plan. One of the advantages of that, once the state adopts and the feds approve a systemic approach to like the lane departure or I'm trying to remember what the other one you said, intersections. The threshold for being able to use the safety funds on a location, it's much easier to achieve because it's part of a systemic approach, and the individual location analysis isn't quite the same. So, for example, the pedestrian safety action plan between the city of Rochester, Monroe County, and NISDOT Region 4, I think it's somewhere like 3,000.
About 1,400 locations.
1,400 locations with, multiple pedestrian elements in single locations. So 1,400 locations being addressed without having to do a high level of analysis for each location to justify the safety funds. They're a systemic approach. So getting approval on a lane departure systemic approach or an intersection systemic approach will actually make it easier, particularly on the smaller localities that either have fewer issues or they don't have the staff to conduct the analysis. We're able to still address some safety needs, and with the safety funds we have coming to the region and the increases we're going to get under the new bill, I'm hoping in the next 5 years we can really drive down some of those numbers.
And I just want to stress that even though the target itself has risen compared to past year's targets, the target for 21 and serious injuries, New York State is continuing to push for targets that are lower, continuing a downward trend. Not all states do that. And so the target is continuing progress. So as the target setting process and reporting and overall performance management framework continues to mature, we'll continue to perhaps look at these maybe more aggressively in the future.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for that.
No, Jim, those are great questions. There's a lot of different ways of querying and data slicing it. The second addition to the National Performance Measures Report today is adding the transit safety performance targets. RGRTA, as the urban provider, has to submit a public transit agency safety plan as part of the FAST Act. They've been doing their own safety management planning and process since the mid-'80s. And so now they have established their official targets based on the years 2015 to 2019, those 5 years for 2022 as well. And those figures are shown here for the 4 modes that RTS Monroe operates.
And I just would add that previously the transit performance measures were related to asset management, and again, similar to what was done for the statewide safety targets, the region or GTC had opted to support transit operators' performance measures rather than trying to do something separate. It really didn't make any sense for us to establish any measures different than what they were doing.
Great, thank you. Are there any more questions or discussion on that? Nope. Okay, hearing none, we had a motion to approve and a second. Are there any objections to that? Any abstentions? Hearing none, we'll consider the action approved. Moving on.
Angela, I realized I did not tip you off who would be talking about this, but it'd be Bob Williams.
Okay, that's all right. Can I have a motion to approve the resolution 21-77, which is the adoption of the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan update?
So moved.
Thank you, Jay. Can I have a second on that? Please.
Joel Kleinberg, so moved.
Thank you, Joel. And Bob, please.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Is it still morning? Is everybody hanging in there?
It's like 10 more minutes.
Okay, let's talk about public transit human services transportation coordination, where I've been living for the last 6 months. Alex, when I say slide, I guess we'll advance. So starting with 2005 Surface Transportation Authorization and then continuing with the FAST Act, legislation required the establishment of locally developed coordinated public transit human services transportation plans, mostly as a condition for receiving funding for FTA-sponsored human services transportation programs. And what do we mean by coordination? We're talking about working together to streamline aspects of service delivery and or jointly managing programs and services. If this is done, human services, the entire human services transportation system can become more productive, efficient, and effective. Slide. So GTC staff developed a planning process that adheres to the federal requirements. Federal requirements say there must be an inventory of available services, there must be a needs assessment, there must be strategies, activities, and projects identified, and also implementation priorities must be identified. I'll describe our advisory committee really quick. It consisted of at least one member from each of our 9 constituent counties and also some regional representatives, including our DRTA, the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Commission, and Common Ground Health as well. And they were a very valuable member of our committee. When we got into our spatial analysis, we looked at the block group level at concentrations of seniors, of persons with disabilities, of low-income households, and also no vehicle households, and brought all of that together into a composite needs index. The image you're seeing here is our destination inventory overlaid, and the destinations typical of those who use human services transportation are human services agencies, such as offices for the aging, departments of social services. It's also senior centers, which often double as congregate meal sites, but we also included meal sites that were not at senior centers, as that's quite common in the more rural counties. We inventoried every full service grocery in a 9-county region, every primary care medical office in the 9-county region, and every bank and pharmacy. There's quite a few. I don't even remember the numbers. It's a fair amount. And then we overlaid them on our composite needs index maps within the report to try to see where are the mismatches. And when you look at every kind of destination versus the composite needs index, you say, hey, wow, the places where the most needs are covered pretty well. When you disaggregate a little bit the destinations, there's not always a pharmacy in every village. There's not always a medical center in every town. So those were some of the things that gave us a little more insight, and we synthesized that and describe it a little bit more within our inventory and needs assessment section of the report. Slide. describing our stakeholder outreach, it was a little bit different in this plan. We had a list of 72 stakeholder agencies, often departments of social services, offices for the aging, but also other groups, including ARCs and all sorts of things, even the Batavia Housing Authority, any sort of organization that might have clients who they may not even provide transportation directly, but may see a need for transportation or provide vouchers or any sort of thing like that. We offered the opportunity to interview for this study. And while nobody took us up on an interview, they all did fill out, I shouldn't say they all, I'll say how many in a second, but those who responded opted to fill out the interview questions as a questionnaire. And we actually got 28 out of 72 to respond, which is 40%, which is as good as I've seen on any planning study I've ever done since I've been in this business. So pretty happy with that. What we discussed were what are typical client destinations? What are typical barriers to your clients to accessing those destinations? What services do you provide? Like I said earlier, do you actually have a fleet of vehicles, or are you using taxi subsidy, or are you giving RTS bus passes? Are you contracting it? That sort of thing. How are you funding that? And what are the barriers as an organization to doing more? All of our stakeholder input got synthesized as an entire chapter within the study. It's well over 20 pages. It's organized by county. I was happy to see that we got pretty good response rates across counties. There's nowhere where we're saying, oh, well, we didn't hear too much from this location. What you're seeing on the screen is the final question. It was more of a survey question. The previous iterations of the coordinated plan in 2011 and then the 2016 addendum had 17 recommendations organized into 4 greater groups. And what I asked all of our stakeholders is how relevant and important do you consider each of those groups? And this is what we saw. And this is my way of organizing it a little bit. When people say they think everything is very important, how do we know what is the most important? And it's typically, I like to organize via this sort of stacked bar chart. And what we'll see is that all of these things are still important. All of these things sort of carry on in the new recommendation set. It's just organized a little bit differently, but public transportation was considered massively important, at least recommendations related to public transportation in previous studies. Okay, slide, and we will talk about the recommendations. This time there are 10, there are not 17. What I found is a lot had very common elements to them, so we kind of brought them together. They aren't grouped into 4 groups. They each sort of stand on their own. The first is mobility managers, which would be policy coordinators, operations service brokers, and travel navigators for each county. The next is a centralized information reservation platform, which is starting with something like manual centralized reservations performed by those mobility managers all the way up to a one-call, one-click platform. And there's some description within the study of efforts that are underway in Ontario, Monroe, and now Livingston to make that sort of thing happen. The next recommendation, innovative transit service related to on-demand services piloted in Monroe right now and bringing those out to the other counties, and then certain other operating parameter changes that we saw as a result of the pandemic for public health reasons when many of the rural counties went to countywide dial-a-ride, and they're actually going to maintain that going forward. Slide. Okay, contracted service, which is an effort to take advantage of excess capacity of other providers' fleets during vehicle downtime. Vehicle and administration sharing is pretty similar, but it's just a little bit different. Now you're talking about, instead of buying service, it's 2 agencies maybe, or 2 providers who have non-overlapping vehicle requirements. They share vehicles and joint administrative activities. Voucher programs is a little more than just giving out bus passes the way it's written in this plan, the recommendation. It's more of a flexible system, flexible vouchers, which build on current practices of providing bus passes and subsidized taxi rides, but you might be able to use them for both or something else. And there's plenty of, I wouldn't say case study, but applicability. Every recommendation within the plan has a section about applicability to the Genesee Finger Lakes region. And so we talk a little bit about why this might be a good idea and how this might actually be implemented. Next, private partnerships, which is going beyond partnerships with local businesses to provide fixed route service. It's more bringing it to 2021 and talking about well, maybe bringing it to 2018 or 19 and examining relationships with ride-hailing services. Certain things like health professionals can book Uber trips. I don't like to name a company, but that's the general thing we're talking about, or advocating for more accessibility on these the vehicles that come to pick up folks from ride-hailing services. Okay, slide. Employment access. So this is pretty classic. Shuttles, ride sharing, van pool, a TMA to focus on mobility and support workforce development. That is something GTC intends to do next year. We probably would have done it already if not for the pandemic, but that's what that's about. Education, travel training, again, classic training for riders of various services, but also we could get into provider training. And I don't mean public transit providers. I mean more of these more specialized providers, training regarding what funding sources are available and how to coordinate, as well as driver training, including customer service standards that, on RGRTA is doing already, but then we could bring that into more service providers. And finally, environmental barrier mitigation. This is altering the physical environment to improve accessibility. So we're starting with assessing priority enhancement locations, places where seniors may wait for the bus that are challenging to access, that sort of thing, sidewalk coverage near senior homes. It'll take a large assessment, but that's the general idea there. And then ultimately some kind of active transportation enhancements. And so you've seen as we've gone through these 3 slides for the recommendations that there's a stakeholder priority column, and some sit high and some sit highest. And what that was we went back and re-engaged both the advisory committee and that giant stakeholder list and asked them, of these 10 priorities, and we gave them the short summary of each, what are your 5? Pick 5 to prioritize. And what we found out was over 70% of respondents went with the first 3. The mobility managers, centralized platform, and transit service, and then over 50% went with the flexible voucher program and employment access. And so those are duly noted within the study. And that is I got to get the order right. It's the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan Update.
Thanks, Bob. Are there any questions for Bob? I know a significant amount of work went into that project, and thanks to you, Bob, and everybody that worked on that. Are there any questions?
Bob, as you were looking at the funding sources, like particularly the employment access, did the county DSS departments and the resources they marshal through the state, suppose consolidated transit access for their clients, enter into making that part of the workforce access too?
Often not. Like I don't think offices for the aging can use that sort of funding. I'm scrolling down really quick within my document to see what I had as.
Like maybe a DSS?
That's what I was looking at.
Yeah, I think the DSS would count because their restrictions have to do with like anything related to getting to an appointment, related to, just general life support.
Right. Or even a job
access.
Interview.
Yeah. So in potential funding services for that one, there used to be something called FTA 5316 called Job Access and Reverse Commute Program. It no longer exists. It got repealed. I don't know, sometime since 2011. However, activities related to employment access are now eligible for funding in FTA 5307 and then also 5311, depending if it's urban or rural. But the recipients must be subrecipients of the state or public body, such as transit operators. Like it's a little tricky in terms of steering that to human services agencies. I mean, you can always get, supplemental funding through chambers of commerce, local development corporations, but I don't know that it's easy for agencies to take their state budget allocation and move it to workforce access.
Yeah, I know it can be a tricky one. We do in Livingston County do have some coordination between the the entities where they do collaborate on rides through referrals through the various agencies, and then select the appropriate funding pot based off of, you know, the ride that's needed. I think the mobility managers within the various counties also are kind of tasked with that where it exists as well. Okay, so are there any, before we do a vote, are there any other questions or comments for Bob? Nope. Okay, well, we have a motion to approve and a second. Are there any objections to that? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, we'll consider it approved. Thank you, Bob. Okay, moving on to reports. Status of UPWP projects.
Great. Thank you. I'll start with the GTC stuff. So under strategic planning, I'm hoping folks heard already, but the Biden administration worked with the U.S. Senate, their staffers and elected officials to pass an infrastructure stimulus program and a new surface transportation legislation that will succeed the FAST Act. I'll talk more about it later, specifically under the item for federal legislation. As I mentioned earlier, the Long Range Transportation Plan was adopted by the board on June 10th. So that was a big accomplishment. So we're moving on. The Finger Lakes scenario tool, our staff have been working with Genesee County on various scenarios for their county comprehensive plan and with the city of Rochester on some scenarios in support of the West Main Street study they have going on, basically taking advantage of you know, our land use and transportation scenario tool to support other efforts. Next slide, the I-490 Integrated Corridor Management Plan. So our staff has discussed various recommendations with the Regional Traffic Operations Center staff. Things are moving well on that. The steering committee did meet to review the various alternatives, and now the consultant is preparing the final report, hoping to have it by the end of the month. With regard to travel time data collection, we're looking to take advantage of the INRIX data that we have and some of the trends. We did have a meeting with INRIX staff and then some folks from the Rochester Museum and Science Center to talk about the 2024 eclipse and how we might be able to use our travel time data in support of the planning efforts for that. Of particular note, the Visit Rochester has estimated, I'm trying to remember the number, I want to say 300,000 visitors for that event.
Yeah.
So Museum and Science Center is serving as sort of a convener of folks, a local task force to prepare for that, and has been in conversations with city officials on potential venues for viewing that event and hosting visitors from hopefully the Mid-Atlantic and East Coast states, because Rochester is the easternmost city with a science center in the path of totality. So there's going to be targeted efforts through Visit Rochester and the I Love New York campaigns in Boston, New York City, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Baltimore, that whole area to try to draw people to Rochester. But we have to have an understanding of what the transportation impacts would be of closing roads in the vicinity of viewing venues, official venues. So the idea being, we have experiences with many years of the Jazz Festival and also Fringe Festival taking place right downtown on Main Street and have an impact. So trying to look back at past events at potential venues and to get understanding, well, what can we anticipate and how do we plan around that? And then what we'll do over the next couple of years as a staff, work at trying to collaborate with our partners across the region to be prepared for that event. A lot of legwork will go in upfront to make a smooth transition there. The Regional Performance Measurement Monitoring and Evaluation System, pretty long name, but basically what this is, the Regional Traffic Operations Center has lots of data coming in, but anytime they want to do reporting, it's a heavy lift. So the idea of automating reporting that both the state and Monroe County are need to do for their operations, and then the potential for automating things like dashboards that can go out to the public. We did have a phase 1 that assessed the needs. We are now in phase 2 of implementing that. So our staff has been coordinating with the Regional Traffic Operations Center staff and the consultant on the database development, the template design for the reports, and the function developments that are going to be, retrieving data from multiple systems and compiling them. That progress is moving well, and my understanding is our partners at the Regional Traffic Operations Center are happy with the way it's progressing. The cross-asset highway and bridge evaluation tool, there's no progress there, as I've mentioned in the past. We are working with Decision Lens, and the finding that really this type of analysis doesn't lend itself well to a mid-sized region like ours, but a statewide basis might be more in line. We've offered to be a pilot area for state DOT, but they've not made a decision on moving forward yet. So that's holding that up. And that takes care of the GTC projects. All the other GTC projects have moved into the done category. So with that, we're moving on to, any questions about GTC projects?
Not hearing any questions. Moving into GFLRPC.
Yeah, we're in the process of working on, Emily is still trying to bird dog some of our constituents as far as the most accurate data on permits for the land use monitoring report. I do know, and also she and Jenny Lowenstein are working on the Complete Streets guidebook, literally. And thank you, Joe Bavenzi, for working with Emily, but also particularly Jenny on the really kicking up finally our role in the fleet electrification study, trying to look at a couple of municipalities, maybe even a county that might look to be pilots for us to help, put something on the ground literally that functions with the idea of, a conversion of your fleet vehicles to electrification. Just so happens my native county, Genesee, basically leases all of our vehicles from Enterprise. And so we're talking to Enterprise about what they can do to be going forward in, shall we say, a more environmentally conscious mode with the 150 vehicles that they rent to that particular county, and making that part of maybe a pilot or a prototype for what we can do on a greater regional basis. And so that's finally all of our staff are working on pieces of this to satisfy our work requirements to our neighbors across the hallway.
Great.
And if I could just comment, the regional fleet electrification study, I think, will help position us well with some of the new programs that I'll talk about later with the new transportation bill.
Yeah.
So the timing is good.
Yeah. Money also.
Thanks, Jay. Are there any questions for Jay on any of the projects? Okay. Moving into Livingston County, I can report on the mobility management strategy. The final draft report has been prepared, reviewed by the steering committee, and is planned to be presented to GTC Planning Committee in October. The recommendations are there. We've actually already started working on the recommendations, starting with the creation of a mobility manager for Livingston County, which will be a contracted service. So we'll be putting an RFP out for that. I just want to thank Bob for all of his help with our group on that project. It's a great project, and we're looking forward to implementing it. And Any questions on that? Nope. Okay. Monroe County. Rochelle, are you covering, or Jim, or who's covering?
Well, for county planning, we just had the presentation of the monitoring review report. So that's all we've got.
Yes, ma'am. I'll finish off Monroe County here. Thanks, Raquel. So the high accent location program had a pretty good period. Of course, it's been a few months since we last met, but we have 8 more high accent location pills or priority investigation reports completed. 5 of them finished out the 2020 to 2021 list. So if you look back at the previous month, we had 5 to go. They're all done. And we began working on our 21 to 22 list with getting the first 3 done on that list. So we have, there's 34 total. We have done 3 and there's 31 to go. Okay. So that's good progress. I'll just give you a moment to catch up, Alex, before I hit the other one. Yeah, that's good. All right. So that's good. So for the Monroe County traffic signal sign pole asset management, the consultant has completed all the data collection. We should be getting a draft report summarizing their findings around the end of this month, in a few weeks. So we'll see around Labor Day, right in there. And we'll get to see exactly what they found overall. And detailed GIS information is already become available. Alex, you probably don't need to say that one, but so we're getting there. Okay, any questions?
No questions for Jim? Okay, moving on to NISDOT. Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Thanks, Rochelle. Ramp reconfiguration study.
Okay, task 7952 ramp reconfiguration study is progressing nicely. There was a steering committee meeting held. This was the 3rd meeting of that committee. It was held on June 28th. That meeting, they discussed comments received on the draft interim report number 1. The management team presented the needs assessment findings, and they also discussed with committee members projected issues. So the next steering committee will be held at the end of August or early September. And at that meeting, they expect to discuss the draft alternatives and also the modeling results, the traffic modeling results.
Thanks, Joel.
Any questions? You bet.
Are there any questions for Joel? Okay, Ontario County. Bill, are you handling that one?
I don't know exactly what's going on with that.
I can talk to it. This is
Okay,
Jody.
good.
So we did receive a final draft report. It's this final draft report. It's been through a couple iterations, but we're getting there on it. And then we have the final public meeting next Tuesday, August 17th. It's going to be a hybrid meeting with a virtual and in-person option. So once we conduct that meeting, we'll present all the recommendations, and then they will finally finish the report. So we're getting there on that project.
Great. Thanks, Jody. Any questions for Jody? Nope. Okay, City of Rochester. Eric, are you doing that one?
I will. Thanks, Angela. So for the West Main Multimodal Transportation Placemaking Study, the project team conducted 5 pop-up events around the corridor in July to get feedback on high-level concepts for the corridor. Consultants are now using the feedback that was obtained through those pop-ups to develop preferred concepts for the corridor, which is from West Broad Street to the Bull's Head area. A final design concept for the corridor will be presented at a public meeting in September, at which point then the final report will be developed and estimated to be completed in October.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Are there any questions for Eric?
Andrew, just a comment. I think the city is to be commended for the amount of opportunities for public interaction on this between public meetings and steering committees. When I'm getting the status reports from staff, it's like, wow, there's a lot of interaction happening on this study that probably to a higher extent than just about any study I've seen. So
Credit goes to Darren Ramsey for making that such a priority for sure.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, RGRTA. Is that Ken or Eric?
I don't know if Ken is still on. He wasn't expected to be. Excuse me. I can just say that I think everybody's aware that the Reimagine system was implemented. I want to say June 17th, or no, maybe May 17th. We'll get the double. May 17th. They reported at their board meeting last week on that. From the fixed route standpoint, things have gone very, very well. They're having some sort of growing pains with their new on-demand service, where in some places it's exceeded the anticipated demand, and other places it's really about a time of day. So they're continuing to collect information and trying to figure out how to rebalance their, if they could find the resources. I think there's even potential to already grow that service, but on the grand scheme of things, it's about 2.5% of the ridership. So they looked at it and said, geez, about 97.5% of our ridership that's on that fixed route has gone super smooth. And now, because we didn't have the issues we might have anticipated there, we can devote some more resources to the on-demand and trying to get that working to a higher level of satisfaction for the customers. But so far, so good. And I guess they're getting a lot of good feedback, particularly on the high frequency routes where they're having 15-minute service, and basically on those routes there is no schedule, no printed time-based schedule. It's just within 15 minutes you should see a bus. So people have responded in the customer survey that they did in June, even though it had only been a few weeks of service, that they responded very positively to the frequency and the crosstown services that are intercepting the route. So and come let's see, so they did June, so come September they'll have another round of onboard surveying where they survey 500 customers for and get a sense of their satisfaction and needs and concerns. They do that every quarter. So maybe by September the kinks will be worked out, and they'll have continue to have a high level of satisfaction.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Any questions for Jim? Okay, Wayne County. Who's planning on covering that one? Is Kevin doing that one?
I could do that one, Angela.
Okay.
This is my project
Thanks,
as well.
Debbie.
Sure. So for the Ontario Midland Strategic Plan, the recommendations were finalized. We received the draft report just a few weeks ago. We're going to set up a final steering committee. I think it's going to be August 22nd or 23rd rather, and that project will be wrapped up after that point.
Great. Thanks, Jody. Any questions, Jody? No? Okay. Other agencies. Village of Waterloo, circulation, accessibility, and parking cap study. Who's going to handle these ones?
I will try to think. Well, I guess, is Chris Tortora on? I wasn't sure if he was on. Okay, so for Waterloo, the consultant has prepared the recommendations and concepts, and the project advisory committee reviewed them at a meeting on August 5th. So once they have all the feedback, the consultant will respond with moving those into a final report. So that's moving along quite nicely. Village of Perry that's yours, right, Alex?
Yep, the Perry, we have a first public meeting this afternoon in Perry, and be getting a lot of input through publicinput.com, and we should be wrapping up our existing conditions and needs report based upon the feedback we're receiving.
All right. Bay is another freight project, so that's right in Jody's wheelhouse. So, Jody, you want to talk about Bay Industrial Park?
Sure. So our consultant met with the businesses a few weeks ago to get their input on their growth plans, just to see future traffic demand at the site. We had a steering committee meeting yesterday, and everything's moving forward on that. We did get some news from NISDOT that they are planning an intersection improvement project at Dean Parkway and Route 104, which is the access point to Bay. So the study is really going to focus on additional access to the park. And we're planning on a public meeting soon, hopefully in September. And that's it.
Great.
And then Candidago Waterfront, I believe, Bob, you're the point person on that one, right?
Yes. Back in June, the consultant held a hybrid workshop where they were both in person at the Canandaigua City Hall City Council chambers, as well as broadcast via Zoom. The purpose was to get public feedback on alternatives at the time. It's my understanding they've since narrowed down to preferred strategies. There was a committee meeting on July 13th to discuss that and get final committee feedback. The last I heard from the consultant, we should see a draft report next week. So they said third week of August. That's coming.
Great.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to ask if there were any questions on any of those. Nope. Okay.
All right. So I was just going to say that I think we started with the last meeting where we started grouping anything that's done into completed studies instead of saying, oh, it's already done. But when you start lumping them together, you can see we've had a pretty productive a year. We even went through and stripped out the projects that were on this last in May that were adopted in December or February. So we've got a full page here of just things that were done at the last board meeting on June 10th. So we're making progress on making transportation planning happen in the region thanks to all our partners.
Great. That's great. A lot of really good work. A lot of people involved too.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Tip staff.
That's it on the project. So.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Reports and tip staff modifications.
Sure, Angela, since the last planning committee meeting, 5 projects have had changes that meet the threshold of a staff modification, and there's unanimous consent by the TIP development committee.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Does anybody have any questions on that? Probably not. I'm thinking not. Okay, moving into the big stuff, the federal legislative and funding update. Oh boy.
Yeah, I apologize. I mean, we're already pretty long into the meeting, but this is some really important stuff that we've been waiting on for quite a while. But on August 10th, which is Tuesday, I think it like very early in the morning, the U.S. Senate passed HR House Resolution 3648, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This is one of those things where the Senate bill was with a substitute resolution, basically working on the utilizing the bipartisan infrastructure framework agreement that was between the president and a bipartisan group of senators that formed the foundation for this act. And quite honestly, the vote was overwhelmingly bipartisan. There was 69 in favor, 30 against. One senator was absent. I think it was a family medical emergency or something like that. But pretty broad support, which is great. The bill provides $383 billion in contract authority from the Highway Trust Fund for a 5-year surface transportation bill. So basically the replacement to the FAST Act that expires on September 30th. The IIJA would succeed the FAST Act and provide an additional $184 billion in appropriations for transportation programs to be released in 5 equal installments each year. So the $567 billion in guaranteed funding over 5 years is $274 billion higher than if you just took the last year of the FAST Act and projected it out for 5 years at a flat level. So a significant contribution or a significant commitment on the federal level to infrastructure, which is really a good thing. With the passage of the Senate bill, it'll now be sent to the House of Representatives. As it stands, the House is on scheduled recess until September 20th. But Leader Steny Hoyer has indicated he will bring the House into session the evening of August 23rd to take up this bill, and says they will stay in session until the business is concluded. So a lot of pressure on the House to get something done. The House needs 281 votes to pass the bill, assuming that there are no changes. If the House makes changes to the bill, then there will need to be a conference committee between the House and the Senate to work out the differences. But since this was a bipartisan effort to begin with, and I believe they borrowed a lot of things from the House Problem Solvers Caucus, I think there'll be a lot of posturing, but at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that the House does not make changes, and that can come to agreement on among the moderates, well, say the two parties, and then the sort of the extremes of each party, that everybody can agree that although nobody gets everything they want, we all get something, and that's what compromise is about. Just some highlights of the bill. The $318.6 billion for highways from the Highway Trust Fund is an increase of 41% over the FAST Act. There's $70 billion for transit formula coming out of the Highway Trust Fund, which is an increase of 43% over the FAST Act. And then there's a $15 billion commitment from the general fund for transit capital investment grants. And that's an increase of 30% over the FAST Act. So that's the high level stuff, but getting more specifically into what the bill includes on a formula program basis. Alex, if you can advance the slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm blocking them. I'm looking at my own presentation. I can't even see what you got up. All right, so the formula programs, $5.5 billion per year for bridge formula program. These funds would come down by formula and be specific to bridges. In past bills, we passed authorizations. There was a highway bridge rehabilitation and replacement program. That program had gone away under FAST Act as a standalone program. IIJA brings a dedicated bridge program back into the mix. A little over $2 billion per year for transit infrastructure. $5 billion over the 5 years for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And this goes back to what I was saying after Jay mentioned the fleet electrification. We have trying to position the region to take advantage of some of these opportunities without even knowing that this was going to come. So And then by formula, $4.7 billion over the 5 years for state of good repair grants, which is basically focusing on existing infrastructure and trying to bring it up to speed. The way it was presented, I wasn't clear if this was transit state of good repair or overall state of good repair, but that term has generally been used in the transit sector. Under some discretionary programs, rather than coming down by formula, there would be grants from the Highway Trust Fund for a bridge investment program. They'll start out, that program will be $600 million in the first year, elevating to $700 million in the final year. Again, a program dedicated to bridges. The Transportation Alternatives Program is being increased from $850 million in the final year of the FAST Act to just shy of $1.4 billion in the first year of the new bill, and just shy of $1.5 billion by the time you get to the final year. It will also increase the eligibility or expand the eligibility of the program to include the safe routes to school type projects and vulnerable road user safety projects. Again, we had our vulnerable users study not long ago that I think helps identify some of the needs in our region. So hopefully we're positioned well to take advantage of this new program. There's some competitive grant programs where, applications will be submitted, whether they're submitted to USDOT, which the bulk of them, I believe, would be, but potentially something, like say a statewide program can submitting on this. So just shy of $1.9 billion per year from the general funds for that same bridge investment program that had some formula support. $640 million per year for Infra Grants, which are grants related to freight projects. $100 million per year for reconnecting, it should be Reconnecting Communities pilot program. And that is recognition of the past design efforts that have separated communities, divided communities, particularly low-income and minority communities in decades past. So what was done with the Interloop East project and what is the city is looking at with the Interloop North project, these are what might be reconnecting communities. I-81 in Syracuse. Unfortunately, this program took quite a hit from the original proposal down to what was actually funded. So at $100 million per year for some major projects, I'm hopeful that we can see some of that, but we just don't know what we'll compete against across the country. It'd be $3 billion per year for Railroad Crossing Eliminations Grant Program. This one's a little interesting because typically the railroad crossing funds come down through a state formula. So I don't know if this is going to be more, say, like to improve efficiencies on some of the longer rail corridors, say like the Northeast Corridor or maybe the Empire Line, where trying to eliminate a series of crossings to improve freight and passenger rail movements. $5.25 billion for the no emissions bus grant program. This is a program that has been around for a while, and RGRTA has been successful in securing some funding for electric buses on this. Certainly consider to we'll continue to strive for that. And $8 billion for a capital investment grant program. Again, it wasn't very clear from the materials that I had, but I believe this will probably be high capacity rail projects, so not likely to benefit our region. There's quite a few new programs which are nice to see. $1 billion per year for a national infrastructure project assistance. We'll have to see what comes out of that, the terms there, but I think this would be for major projects. $1.5 billion a year for local and regional project assistance. Again, a competitive grant, but this is intended to benefit municipalities and counties as opposed to funding state projects. So this provides some good opportunities to go after. $5 billion for safe streets and roads for all competitive grant programs. So the idea of complete streets and trying to create opportunities for all users. And I think with some of the planning efforts we've done in our region, we $1 billion for culverts program. It's one of those things a motorist might not know, but if the crossing isn't more than 20, has got to be at least 20 feet to be deemed a bridge. So there's sometimes you'll see a series of arches in some of our places that you think, oh, that's a bridge. Well, no, it's a couple culverts next to each other. But then we have other places like Ontario County is experienced where the culvert is under the road, but it might be 40, 50 feet under the road. So it's a big effort to try to tackle those projects. And as it stands now, they don't stand out as they don't qualify as a bridge project, and they don't compete as very well as a road project. So having a dedicated culverts program could be beneficial. Establishes a new carbon reduction program. We'll have to see what comes out of that, whether that's sort of like CMAQ type projects, fleet electrification, all of the above. But one thing that's interesting, 65% of a state's funds need to be sub-allocated to urbanized areas by population. So what that says to me is we will get a dedicated pot for our urbanized area that we get to pick. We get to decide on some real projects. So again, that fleet electrification study, or maybe expanding active transportation, we have some opportunities to implement some of the things we're planning for. And the last new program to mention is the promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation, or the PROTECT program. This is related to resiliency of our transportation system. And we had done a few years ago our critical transportation infrastructure vulnerability assessments. And then we followed that on with a companion of looking at just the local bridges. So again, I think the planning efforts that we've done in our region to help position us to take advantage of some of these programs. But I focused on the transportation aspects of things, but the IIJA looks at an awful lot of other types of infrastructure, bring in total $1.2 trillion, but there's broadband, there's sewer, water, trying to get lead pipes out of our drinking water supplies. So a wide cross section of infrastructure being supported. So we'll see what the House does with it. With that, I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have about IIJA as we're continuing to learn more information.
No questions?
Just a comment. It seems to me that, like you said, Jim, that last piece, there's so much money out there. And in New York State, we got to be very particular about also making sure what the state's going to get, and then what they're going to, in some cases, allow the rest of us to access or push down, particularly some of these EDA grants and other things. I think the transportation stuff is well targeted towards existing plans and efforts. I know, particularly as a resident of Genesee County that owns every bridge over and every culvert over 5 feet, Tim Hens is going to be at this like, yesterday and the day after tomorrow. But it also strikes me that our congressional delegation needs to be aligned consistently with regard to these programs if this is going to be successful in the House of Representatives. And it's a narrow margin right now to get anything passed. And so that, I think, is going to be what a lot of us should be spending our time on also, is buttonholing those federal politicians and saying, so where do you stand on this? And what is it that's going to take this to get done?
Yeah, Jay, that's a great point. And everybody, all our member agencies have the ability to do that. GTC staff is precluded from trying to influence Congress. So, we'll provide whatever information or background that we can to help you folks. Anybody who wants to try to advocate for this. I think the other thing that we'll have to do is try to manage expectations that, just because there's a big insurgence of money doesn't mean you're going to see, shovels in the ground right away. It
No.
takes time to properly design and prepare for these projects. So I'm glad to see some of the programs that start out and escalate over time. But hopefully that we'll be able to fully take advantage of many of the federal highway programs. The money becomes available in this year, and you got 3 years to access it. So those kinds of things we'll have to take advantage. And then just whatever we're able to do, like I said, to advance the design and get things in the pipeline. So we were talking TIP earlier, having that $9 million uncommitted at this point to any specific project could help us get a jump start on some of these things. And then, say going into the federal discretionaries, we've got design already paid for, might give us a leg up. So
Well,
we'll
I
see
think
how that goes.
what you guys do, Jim, in particular, and all the counties, I think, is it's informed advocacy. You can walk in and you can talk to these people and say, here's what's in my backyard. Here's what our needs are. But we're also aligning these on a regional and super regional basis because we recognize that this stuff doesn't stop at the boundaries of the borders. It continues on, like the thruway, so to speak. So what can we all do about getting that and maximizing those resources on the existing problems that we've got?
Great.
All right. Just to try to move things along, I don't have anything new on the other matters. The public engagement highlights, we just have taken advantage of trying to promote activities and events of some of our partner agencies as well. You can see on the slide a list of things we actively work to promote, even beyond GTC activities. We have a placeholder for anybody, any other updates. Nobody has brought anything to my attention, but I don't want to cut that short.
Does anybody have anything for Jim or for the group? Guess not. Okay. New business.
So I realize we've gone pretty long already, but I ask that you indulge me for a few minutes because in May, Ruck first introduced this idea and we did not really have time to discuss it and was thrown at you cold. But I wanted to follow up on what was said in May, and Mitch Gruber from the Rochester City Council and John Baines from Monroe County Legislature had reached out to me about establishing an active transportation advisory group that they would like to be part of, but also bring in diverse stakeholders with the intention of weighing in on various GTC efforts from an active transportation perspective. But over the years, I've had similar requests from various bicycle advocacy groups. One of the things that's nice about the approach that Mitch and John came forward with was the idea of trying to bring in broader perspectives and not just have another echo chamber. And it's like, okay, that resonated, and we had been thinking about it, and also had contemplated some type of community advisory committee that can weigh in on various transportation issues. So and then that was partnered with, or I guess timing wise, our federal certification report. We received a letter, the final report a couple weeks ago, and our federal partners will be presenting it to the GTC board in 2 weeks. And within that, there's a recommendation to explore opportunities to encourage equity and diversity within the transportation planning process. So we think, all right, well, how do we do this? And the bylaws do allow for the planning committee chairperson to establish advisor groups with the advice and the consent of the executive committee. But given that the full board is meeting in 2 weeks, I don't see a sense calling the executive committee together just to make a recommendation when we can have the full board weigh in. But I did want to at least run this idea by the planning committee first, and I would envision that this advisor group starts out a bit slow and would likely evolve over time, but then it could also potentially serve as a template of how we might have advisory groups on other topic areas. And just by way of background, many years ago, there was a bicycle pedestrian advisory committee established. For those that have run around long enough, Kristen Bennett was staff then. I don't have a clear understanding of why that ceased to be. There's various anecdotes out there, but I don't want to get into that because I think there's motivations behind some of those anecdotes. But a few key points I would want to bring up about creating a new active transportation advisory group would be that the group would provide feedback on bicycle and pedestrian issues for consideration by the UPWP Development Committee as it goes through its processes, by the TIP Development Committee as it goes through its capital project processes, or the Planning Committee. So basically, when there's an opportunity for some input from that perspective, from a diverse board, they can provide some input we might not otherwise see. But along those lines, I really want that we would create some that the group, it needs to be diverse and represent voices from across the community. We need to have racial diversity, economic, gender, urban, suburban, rural, any of those kind of factors, looking at bringing the various voices to the table and given an opportunity of for true interaction, but at the same time trying to make something manageable. I mean, really, 10 to 15 is probably the max that we can manage as an advisory group and still be able to be functional. We would think of the group being potential for being a sounding board for regional regional active transportation efforts, like the Regional Trails Initiative that, it's been a few years since we've updated that. We have in our long range plan calling for creation of complete streets policies and trying to perpetuate those throughout the region. So it could be a sounding board for that type of stuff. Where it makes sense is almost like an advise or a focus group for things like the Monroe County Active Transportation or the City of Rochester's Active Transportation. But those studies, by and large, will have their own steering committee, but it's another forum to bring in some voices potentially. But then what was, it's interesting. You always wonder, okay, like I said, a city council member and a county legislature approached me and, it's like, all right, so what's the motivation? But as they relayed, they could be a bridge between the residents of the region and the community and those that are passionate about the active transportation, or see it as just a need in their community. The bridge between those folks and the policymakers who are ultimately making the decisions and the policies, but don't necessarily have the same lived experiences, or even be bicyclists themselves or whatever. So I realize I just threw a lot at you, and I'm trying to not kick this down the road for October. Angela and Alex and I had a chance to discuss this a little bit, and we've discussed it internally. Alex and Bob and I. Bob on our staff would be the person that staffs this, but I really would be interested to hear any thoughts on establishing an advisory group of various stakeholders to get input. Any thoughts from the group?
This is Eric from the city. I'd certainly welcome the establishment of this organization, or this committee, I should say. When we applied for bike-friendly community status, one of the things that we don't have either as a city or a region is a sort of formal or informal, but a sounding board for bicycle and pedestrian issues specifically. And so, doing this at a regional level, I think is a really good way to do that. I say that because sure, the city could theoretically do one of its own. But a lot of the times when we do our projects, obviously, we have a complete streets policy, and we do our best to meet the needs of all all users in our projects. A lot of the comments we get are not necessarily from city residents. So, we're the city, but we're the regional center, and we'll have people from, Fairport, Victor, Chili, wherever, you name it, and they're interested. And a lot of times they'll say, well, why can't the city do more in the suburbs? And I said, well, that doesn't make much sense. So having a regional sounding board, and of course the city would participate. I guess I could say that. I can't officially say that, but as staff, I'd certainly see how myself or Darren would be involved in this if possible. So I'd certainly welcome it, and I think it would be a good opportunity for the region as a whole.
This is Bill. I guess my concern relative to this, number one, I think there's already forums for which any group of any sort has input into the tip processes or anything that we do. I guess my concern is what power does this group have, and what happens if we don't take their advice? And will we get to a point where this group is opposed to things we're doing because we can't always incorporate things that everybody wants? And I don't know, I just get a little bit concerned about the motivation sometimes behind it. It's good. It's nice to have people with these types of inputs and advice and sort of backgrounds, but I'm just concerned about where this can lead to, I guess. And
Bill, that's a very valid concern, and a phrase we use often is managing expectations.
Yeah.
So as we pull this together, we're going to need to manage expectations of just what this advisory group can accomplish. And again, the thought is that, and we would have to make sure they're clear that, yeah, we're going to look at some thoughts, their opinions, but those need to be weighed against other opinions. I do not envision this group, picking tip projects or picking UPWP projects, but perhaps offering some thoughts to, okay, we got these applications. Here's some things we think could benefit. We had a tip project in the last cycle where in an inner-rig suburb that, for our long-range plan said, this is a place, the entering mature suburb that needs to have, sidewalk at least, and needs to have some bicycle, at least consider bicycle facilities. And though the right of way was available, the project sponsor was not not looking to do anything to put in facilities that don't exist. And the TIP development committee did not, that project did not rise high enough to get funded. So that tells you, our process is robust, and we're pretty strong there. But sometimes it's just a matter of a forum that allows sort of some cross-pollination of ideas, some more on the policy side of things, and the regional approaches, as opposed to individual projects. Individual road or bridge projects are going to have their own public engagement as part of the design process, and we are not substituting for that. This is the idea being, before we even get to that point, trying to influence the holistic look.
Well, is this an advisory group to GTC?
Yes. Yeah. So it would be, they would meet periodically, and this allows the UPWP Development Committee or the TIP Development Committee to consider or the Planning Committee to consider some input. But it also becomes a way of sharing information where they would advise GTC, but whatever comes out of this group and the idea sharing would not be restricted to only GTC using it. Other communities could take what was learned in one community and adapt it to their other. But so trying to have it as a resource as well, whether it be a sounding board that then we at GTC become a clearinghouse for some information exchange or project sharing ideas of approaches. But it's just an effort to bring voices to the table that might not have been involved early in the process. But again, managing expectations is going to be key, that we don't give the impression that, certainly they don't have veto power or, being able to dictate what's going to go on in other processes, but just weigh in from a perspective that could sometimes have more consideration than it does now.
Okay.
Jim, this is Joel.
Oh, go ahead. Jim.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that I think that, conceptually the idea is good, and I talked about this a little bit with Jim and Alex yesterday. And this is kind of, I guess, to Bill's concern relative to, there's a difference in having an advisory group that is comprised of, say, professionals that could provide feedback and input on projects upon request, versus a group that somehow gets inserted into the approval process that we already have in place, whether it's the TIP or whether it's the UPWP. And I think there's just a little bit of a caution about what the roles and responsibilities would be for that group, so that everybody, I guess to Jim's point, those expectations can be managed, because we could see where it would be easily taken in a direction that could be, I think, conflicting or create some additional layer of review that may or may not be necessary or desired.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to vet this by the planning committee first and see, as we sort of draw up in essence a term sheet as to what the committee is or isn't. These are some of the insights that are important to kind of putting that framework together. Certainly not another layer of approval, but the intention would be providing a more consistent forum to bring this perspective to the table, and again, trying to reach, particularly in the disadvantaged communities, people that might not even be aware of how do they get heard in the process. And I would suspect, at least initially, the primary focus of the group would be City of Rochester, Monroe County areas, maybe going a little beyond that initially, but I don't think it's manageable or reasonable to say it's the full 9 counties from day one. The needs in the rural areas are different from the needs in the suburban areas, are different from the needs in the urban area. So, it's a matter of starting somewhere, and if it's going to grow, it might be that there is a committee that looks at the central core. There's a committee that looks at like the GLOW counties on the west side, and a different committee that looks on the counties on the east side. Not sure, but initially starting out small and manageable is my thought.
This is Joel. Jim, I have 2 suggestions. One would be, if memory serves, we talked about a Monroe County-wide active transportation study under the UPWP, and it sure sounds like this group might mesh well with that study. My second suggestion would be to reach out to NIMTIC. I am dating myself, but back in the day, they had something similar, I believe, and there may be some lessons learned there. But I share some of the concerns, and just, once there's something more formalized to react to, I think it may be easier for this group. But until there's a proposal for what exactly they would be doing, I think it's very difficult to react to the formation of this committee. Though, again, I certainly support the concept of involving historically disadvantaged communities and making sure that active transportation is part of our considerations. So might I suggest we do some more research and like I said, perhaps some of the other MPOs have experience we can learn from, and that maybe something more formal could be presented for us to read and react to?
Yes, and I will say that because my staff can be a little more proactive than I am, there has already been a fair bit of outreach to explore what are our partners across the state doing, and there's a broad range of approaches that they're taking. But Alex has pulled some information, I think, about 10 MPOs that were in that document you shared with me, ranging everywhere from a very formal weighing in on projects to like Syracuse does a quarterly forum that I think is just sort of, hey, open up and here's what's going on, serves as like an information exchange. So through our partnership with the New York State Association of MPOs, we've been able to glean some information on how some others are doing. But to your point, trying to draw up something more for the committee to react to, we certainly could do that. I'd rather do it well than do it fast. And I guess I would just want to see, is there sort of consensus among the group to further put some further effort into exploring this idea as opposed to no way, no how, it's not going to happen.
Oh, I think we can explore it. I just, like Joel, a little concerned about what the terms are. So I think, yeah, I would support looking at it. I think anything that helps you do your job and make sure we're meeting the needs of all the community groups, I'm all for it. But I just want to make sure that we're not adding layers here. So it's tough enough to get all of us to agree on things. So someone add somebody else, but that's okay.
Okay.
Jim, back to the point about the UPWP, is there an ability to utilize that UPWP study to kick something off? I mean, it sure sounds like there's a synergy there.
I think there's possible we would need to coordinate with Monroe County, obviously. I want to be careful that we're not, sort of subverting their intentions of a steering committee to guide that, because I don't think that's the intention of this advisory group. But at the same time, the city is moving forward on an active transportation plan that they'll have its own steering committee. So I think there probably is some opportunity if this advisory group goes forward of some interaction with that, but I don't think it would be in lieu of a steering committee for each of those studies, because they're focused on particular areas.
Okay.
Agreed.
So then kind of a summary of the next steps. GTC staff will kind of take a look at it and provide kind of a proposed, some more meat on the bones, so to speak, for the next meeting. Is that what you're thinking, Jim?
Yeah, and I guess if I can get the blessing of the group to pitch the idea to the board in 2 weeks to say, hey, would they be comfortable delegating a final structure back for planning committee to sort of adopt the way the bylaws read? Like I said, the advisory groups can be formed by the planning committee chairperson, but they're written, with the advice and consent of the board executive committee, which, gets involved in some of the operations of the staff to some extent, very limited, usually when there's only problems. But to satisfy the bylaws, maybe we seek the the board in 2 weeks, saying, delegate it back to the planning committee for a final structure, and then that way perhaps we can wrap some stuff up in October and not have to wait till December, and be able to put this into effect before we get too far along in some of the major planning efforts, like what city and county are going to be doing with active transportation.
Hey, Jim, I just want to throw out there that there's almost nobody on from the planning committee anymore on the WebEx. We're kind of down to staff. There's like 14 people on, but I think only like a very few people from the planning.
Yeah, we had a lot had to
committee
drop
members
off.
are on. Yeah, so I don't know if that it was going to influence your decision, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, the bylaws do say that action is taken by the majority of those present. So there's no minimum requirement to maintain in that quorum. So,
well, I guess my only concern going to the, and I don't think it's a bad idea to go to the board and just like you're doing now is sort of saying, we're looking into this. Do you have some big objections, and throwing it back to the planning committee to decide maybe. I just don't want to say anything to the board that makes it like it's a done deal here, so it's a lot to throw at us, and all of a sudden to go to the full board with, and I wouldn't want it to be outlined as if it's been discussed at the planning committee and the planning committee is all for this, because we haven't seen the details, Jim, and I think we just need to see it, because I think it's a perfect, as Joe was saying, it's like a perfect advisory thing that, with the two planning going on between the city and Monroe County. I think that would be a great place for it. I just don't want it necessarily get the cart before the horse here, but to get someone of the board sort of, understand that we're looking into it, I think is okay.
Maybe exploring the creation of an advisory group. Does that make sense, Bill? Is that really?
Yeah, I think that, and ask for the board to allow you as the planning committee to work out the details as the bylaws say, right?
That's what the kind of approach I would want to take, but maybe what we'll do is take what we heard today about some of the concerns and try to just put some I don't even know if I'd call it framework, but maybe some parameters on, here's the limits of what that group might be. So would the board be comfortable having the planning committee work out the details and then come back to the planning committee in October with something more refined in the package in advance with here's sort of an outline or term sheets of what we would expect and in more detail on what this group would do or not do.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay. I'm happy to. I might be one of the few people left on, but I don't. If I think if DOT and Joel thinks that's okay, then I think that's good. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, and Bill, from my perspective, as I said before, I'd rather get this done well than get it done fast. I don't want to get out ahead of anybody on this group what they're comfortable with, and certainly you folks are the direct advisors to the board members. So if there's not a comfort level among the planning committee, then there's not even anything to present to the board. But I think the idea of just saying, hey, we've had this interest for an advisor group, the bylaws provide for it, the certification review that's presented in the meeting calls for some more diverse input. Here's maybe a first crack at trying to achieve that, but details to be worked out through the planning committee if the board is agreeable. I think that's a sound approach.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Angela, that's all I have, and we've gone way over what we would typically do. And I appreciate everybody sticking it out and their patience. I guess, Jody, is there anybody left on the PI?
There says that it does say that there's people on there, but we don't have any questions right now. So.
Well, thanks for everything that, all the GTC staff do. I mean, this was a tremendous amount of of work for today and a lot of resolutions and actions. And I know a ton of work that goes into it on the part of all of you. So thank you for everything that you do. It really is appreciated.
Oh, thank you for that comment. And, we couldn't do it without the folks around the table having the patience to stick through. We have up on the slide, the next meeting is scheduled for October 14th at NISDOT. We have it to be confirmed because we don't know what COVID's going to do as far as being able to meet in person. But I, for one, would love to be able to get back together and have an in-person meeting. So we'll see how that shakes out.
It'd be nice. Very nice. Okay.
So I think the only thing left is to adjourn.
Yeah, do
I'll
we need
move it.
to ask about the public forum? I mean, although.
Jody just said that there was no questions in the
Okay.
public. So
All right, so then I think there's still a couple of us left, so can I have a motion to
I'll
adjourn?
move it. I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Bill. How about a second? Joel?
All second, happily.
Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate
All
it.
right.
everyone, stay safe.
Yeah.
Thanks. Have a great
Bye.
weekend.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.